Alright, so just a bit of an explanation as to the LeBlanc Jungle. Guess the most important things I'll go through quickly. I take Q first because the lower mana cost, lower cooldowns. And you might think the W is better because it does do AoE, which is good. But the thing is, I can't remember what it is. I think it's a 12-second cooldown at level 1. I have 10% cooldown reduction from runes and masteries, but I'm pretty sure it's 10%. I'm pretty sure it's like a 12-second cooldown with that. Whereas the Q, and it only does like 5 extra damage or something like that, 5, 10 extra damage. I don't know. But if you compare that to the Q, right, it does almost the same damage. But your aim at the first buff is to kill the big monster. For example, if you're doing the red buff, the Lizard Elder, as quick as you can. And so because the Q is on a shorter cooldown, a 6-second cooldown, you do more damage than you would if you on him alone if you were using the W, because he's the one that's doing the most damage to you, let's be honest. So as for which buff to start at, I start red because you still have the red buff after you've cleared both your buffs, and you could potentially gank. You generally gank one lane and go back, but you could potentially gank two. And yeah. So you start at your red buff, and if that's where I start. I start at red buff. The downside of always starting at red is if you're on the bottom side of the map, it's fine. It's actually really good. That's ideal. You start at the bottom side of the map. You get started at red buff. Your team leashes you. I mean, you've got bot lane to leash you, right? That is if the AD carry wants to leash, and potentially even a mid laner to leash. So that can be really good to get you started, get you rolling. What you need to watch out for is that you don't get too low in the jungle and you don't get invaded. So what I usually do is I go from first buff straight to second buff. And what that allows you to do is to straight away, one, you don't have much to stay in the jungle at all. You've got nothing. So you need to just clear your buffs as fast as you can. Pretty much like I don't know. It's like some of the Shaco jungles, and get those 2 buffs and then get to mid. Mid is generally the easiest lane to gank. You could potentially, if you're on the bottom side of the map and you're starting at red, you could potentially gank top. There's always the risk of counter jungles there. Sorry, not counter jungle, counter ganks. That could be dangerous. If you look at the lane where the lane is. If the lane is pushed up, it could be a lane gank incoming, and a lot of pretty much all the junglers. Pretty much, I'll say this: if you miss one thing as LeBlanc, if you miss a chain, and you shouldn't have chain at level 2, but if you miss your chain, you're going to be in trouble because the enemy jungler is going to stomp all over you, and you've got no damage. All you've got is your red buff, and you can kite to an extent. But if they got a gap closer, which most junglers do, because that's kind of their advantage, and that's why they're junglers. So, from a simple jungler to Zinzao to your meta junglers like Lee Sin, Rengar, blah blah blah. If they've got jumps and they get onto you, you're probably going to die because they'll CC you. And then if you die and you give the red buff and the blue buff over, all of a sudden both your enemies have red buff and your teammate dies as well. It's just a fail. You got to watch out for that. Another reason why I started red buff is because a lot of people think that LeBlanc starts at blue buff. So if you take Q first, you don't need to start at blue because the W is more mana costly. So if you start at red, and you're against an Eve jungle, Shaco jungle, Lee jungle, you're not prone to getting invaded because they think you're going to start at blue, and if they go to your red buff to invade you, what have they done? They've wasted time. Maybe they could take your wraiths, but your wraiths should respawn anyway by the time you get back around. Even if they've left one wraith behind, it doesn't matter. You could go take something else. You won't clear that many camps early as LeBlanc anyway. Your aim is to gank lanes. So what you do is get both your buffs, go gank a lane, generally mid lane. That should be an easy gank. you'll see in the video, I ganked Yasuo mid, fed Fiora, and then what does that result in? Okay, I go back, I've got enough gold to buy Spirit Stone, level 1 boots, ward, health pot, mana pot, whatever. And that gives me a bit more sustain to clear a camp and then gank lane again. And now here's the brilliance of having blue buff second, is that it lasts you from the dangerous zone of LeBlanc is from levels 3 to 6. Right? I would say from 3 to 5, really. From 3 to 5. Where you've got if you don't get a gank, you know, it's going to be really tough for you. If you do, it's a little bit easier. But from levels 3 to 5, you need to try and find one more gank minimum. I'd say ideally 2, and clear a few camps. Generally, wraiths are easiest to clear early on, because all you gotta do is take out the big wraith, and then the other ones just, yeah, they go down pretty quick. So yeah, from levels 3 to 5, just clear a few camps, and probably even gank. Just gank the lane that you ganked originally. You see in the video, I saw Yas. He was about in the middle of the lane, but I saw where the waves were going to meet, and I saw that he was trying to push up a little bit onto Fiora earlier, because he still had exhaust, right? So he thought maybe he thought he could still do it with Fiora, and and maybe he was trying to take advantage of her she's strong pre-6, but maybe he was trying and capitalize while he could. Maybe he thought he could kite her, outplay her, something like that, because of the damage reduction from exhaust. But yeah, I went to say a few things to him, and we ended up getting another kill, which resulted in me being able to go back, buy items. I ended up with Moby Boots. I rushed Moby Boots because it gives you mobility around the map. I mean, well, no shit, Moby Boots mobility around the map. But as LeBlanc, you're a jungle mobility god. You have your W, you have your R. I haven't tried it. I guess I prefer having flash just for those split situations, for extra juking potential, for closing down gaps. I just feel like flash can be really useful. I mean, it's a flash, it can be used aggressively, defensively, whatever. I mean, and of course, the jukes, flash jukes and blah blah blah. But I haven't tried with teleport. Teleport could potentially be really good, because if you got home guard Mobies, you could potentially teleport into a lane, into wards, and you could really do some damage. I mean, increase your mobility around the map even further. Cut down all those walking times even further. I haven't tried it. That might be something I'll try next. But yeah, personally, I thought I'll just take flash to be safe, because early on is really dangerous. You're really prone to invades. So from there, I think in terms of builds, get those Moby Boots, finish your Spectral Wraith. After that, you can go into, depending on how you're going with the game, you can go to Zhonya's, maybe get a Seeker's Arm Guard to reduce the damage from the jungle. You could depending on maybe if they're AD, you could also get, of course Zhonya's active is always good. You could also get DFG, because let's face it, DFG, LeBlanc, it's good. We all know it. Suits her combo, blah blah blah. Even just for finishing potential, it's got a bit more range than the Q as well. So if someone's really low in the under tower, you just drive by DFG. What else? Yeah, I generally take the first few buffs. So I might take the first um, maybe 4 buffs, depending. I'll probably you kind of need the second blue buff, but then after that, you start giving it across because you'll have the spectral wraith, you got the mana regen, and if you do decide after, I mean, if you depending on how long the game is going to go, you think if you're snowballing, get DFG probably or Rabadons. If not, then potentially you're going to be in a lot of situations where you need your cooldown reduction, and so potentially getting, depending on who you're against, Morellonomicon or Athens. It can be good. It all depends on the matchups. If you're against heavy AP or against obviously if you're against champions like Swain, right? If you're hyper carries with heaps of lifesteal and things like that, and regen or Akali, that's where Morellonomicon comes into effect really well. Gives you cooldown reduction, not as much mana regen as the Athens, but still, you combine the mana regen with your jungle item. It's still good. And so you'll scale a little bit further into late game. And I feel like LeBlanc Jungle does well late game because you set up a lot of picks for your team. You probably buy more wards. You focus on controlling the map more. And yeah, the game potential is just really good. What else do I have to talk about? I guess it goes without saying that securing with LeBlanc, securing objectives like Dragon and Baron, you don't really have an excuse. If you're quick enough on the combo, you don't really have an excuse to, because people underestimate your damage onto the monsters. So if you execute your combo, you don't really have an excuse to get outsmarted because you can just chunk on 1500 damage ish, whatever. On the first dragon, you can chunk on over 1000 damage in one hit, and then they just have their smite, and that's combined with your team as well. I mean, try and time it, and you should be fine. That's pretty self-explanatory. Try and ward good places in the jungle, like the enemy wraiths bush. So that way it just gives you an idea. There's also that one behind the red buff, where at level 2 people, they take red buff first and then they come to that bush behind red buff in an attempt to smite steal and then freaking F you up and invade you and kill you and set you behind. It's generally the Eve tactic, Lee Sin tactic. He'll Q in and then smite and you die. And it's really awkward if he pulls it off, because then you'll be set behind a lot. He might take your race camp. So that bush there is where a really good place to place a pink ward potentially, or maybe even just a normal 3-minute ward, vision ward. Yeah, that can be really good. You'll have vision of the enemy jungler's pathing. If it's a pink ward, not many people check that bush. So with the pink ward, you'll have vision of the enemy jungle's pathing for ages. If you combine that with the bush near the wraiths, you should be set. I mean, that's really good. Just map control. You'll know where the enemy jungler is. Sets up ganks easier for you. Yeah. I'm not sure if I said it already, but even though you take Q first, max W. So I take Q, then W, then E, and then W. At level 5 though, I do take Q again. I like having levels in both because it helps with burst potential. Just having that extra sigil activation damage. But after that, once you get your ult, level 7, I'll take W again. And then level 8, I think you can take W again because you've taken 2 levels in Q. But level 8, sometimes I take Q, sometimes I take W again. I generally max them simultaneously, Q and W. But I take Q first because I'm in the jungle. But generally, I'll max the W first. So even though I'm bringing them up to speed, I'll level 1 up, I'll level the W up, and then I'll level the Q up. I'll always level that W up first. And it ends up being a stage where I have level 5 W, but level 3 Q. And I reckon it's just because the WR that distortion, just the mobility, the lower cooldown, and it just does so much damage. Yeah, the clear times in the jungle are really quick. Like probably, if you can get ahead, she has like one of the highest clear times in the jungle amongst all junglers. It's just insane. If you get ahead, you literally clear it in no time at all. A couple seconds. It pretty much is. You just queue the big monster, WR, done. That's if you get ahead. If not, QWR, a couple of autos, maybe smite, whatever. But yeah, you should be fine. So, both buffs, take Q first, max W, gank mid is generally the easiest. Choose which buff you're going to take first, depending on what side of the map you're on, how much of a leash you want. I like to take red buff first, just for the early gank, and then, but more importantly, it's for I have the blue buff for extended mana sustain in the jungle between the dangerous zone of levels 3 to 5, so I can gank more, I can clear camps more, and then at level 5 I can go take my buffs, hit level 6, massive gank potential, mobility around the map, level 6. You've got your W and your R. That's potentially either WR gap closer to finish off, or that's W in and 2 chains. Wait for your first chain to proc, and then get your second chain once they're snared. Right, so that way you can't miss. If they're snared, they can't flash. You shouldn't miss that second chain. I do miss them occasionally, not often, but the odd chain I do miss, and it's pretty awkward, but that's how you go about it, and you shouldn't lose out. I think I've covered pretty much everything. Maybe full build I need to cover. Full build, you could go, if you've kept the Moby Boots, because your team is, if you have an AD team, you might want to keep Moby Boots. You don't need as much Magic Pen, because I've got Magic Pen in my runes, by the way. If you've got Magic Pen in your runes, so let's have a look at my runes. Now, this is a really weird rune page. I call it standard LB, but I know it looks weird. +1 physical damage. This is because I don't have that many rune pages, and this is my mid laner LB runes. And I just take it. It's more like just my general AP. This is my extreme damage. I call it extreme damage. It's stupid. I've just got 26 AP for early kill potential. Same armor and magic resist, but the difference is I don't have the 5 cooldown reduction. And as LeBlanc, when you go in anyway, you just need to wait for your cooldowns. It just means for a couple, if you're just purely focusing on laning, then it's not really much of a difference. It just means you wait a couple extra seconds before you go in with your W, right? If you're in the jungle though, or if you're being ganked by someone and they take you unawares, maybe they flash, something goes different, you're forced into a situation you don't like, and all of a sudden your W is on cooldown, those 2 seconds can be pretty important. It could be the difference between Lee getting his Q back off cooldown, and then if you had your W, maybe you could have, if he's got you in a tight spot, maybe you could have dodged his Q. I don't know, or maybe because the W is so important, avoiding ganks, because when people gank you, they'll generally wait for your W to be off cooldown. So having it on a shorter cooldown, at least you can walk around, maybe wait for it. If you've got a few levels in it, the cooldown could be 7 seconds or something like that, 8 seconds. So this is why I take these runes. 6 armor, 2.2 magic resist, because LeBlanc is a go ham champ. She wants to send people down. And there's a lot of strong AD champs in the mid lane at the moment, but also because it does suit you're in the jungle, more armor than magic resist. Cooldowns, 5% cooldowns, 5% from masteries. I'll show the masteries in a second. 1% physical damage, that's more for last hitting. It's only 1 physical damage. But yeah, auto attacks are really big on LeBlanc in the mid lane, especially at level 1. Against champions like Fizz, Zed, things like that. You dodge their Zed shuriken, and you auto attack him a few times. Or you W forward and then auto attack them a few times. And with this this is changed to LB, where it's 4 seconds to port back instead of 3. You can get off potentially 3 auto attacks, I think. you can just scrape in 3 auto attacks and then W back, depending on if they stand in range, right? 7 magic pen, so I've sacrificed 0.8 magic pen for 1 physical damage, I think. You call it what you will, that might not be worth in your books, but I feel like she's really hard to CS with, and sometimes those early CS can be really important to get that gold, and also make sure you don't lose any XP, like just to get the experience advantage early. If you can make sure you can just get all those minions down without wasting as much mana. Masteries. So this is my typical AP masteries, right? This is really important. Damaging an enemy champion with a basic attack increases spell damage by 1%, stacking up 3 times, because what have I been talking about? You auto with LeBlanc a lot, and this is where the mobility with your chain is really important, because you auto attack them, you chain them, maintain as much maximum range as you can with your chain. They'll try and walk out of it. Maybe they'll try and walk towards you. You got to try and judge how they're walking and maintain the maximum distance to avoid their spells and their damage. And then this is where your auto attacks really starts to increase your damage. You send out the second chain, auto attacks, Q, W. That's how you get kills. Again, as using your mobility as your advantage instead of just outright burst, Q, R, W, whatever. Because a lot of champs might nullify your damage. If it's Syndra, she stuns you during your W. That's the majority of your damage gone, and you're effect. If it's Zed, what happens if he ults during your ult? You're effect. If it's Fizz, what happens if he pole vaults? But whereas if they're snared, they can't do shit. And it's just good times for you. Basic attacks also deal bonus damage equal to 5% of ability power. That's standard. Plus 6 magic pen, armor pen. Yep. Plus 3%. Yeah, that's standard stuff. Increase ability power. Yeah. What people like having that half-second recall thing. I feel like if you've juked someone well enough, they don't know where you are. That recall time doesn't matter as much. And also, if you play smart enough, you shouldn't need that recall time as much. The movement speed's important. Mana regen, cooldown of some of the spells. That's pretty self-explanatory. That's my AP page. Now, LeBlanc Jungle page, you'll see the difference. Look at 17, 13. Reduces incoming damage from champion basic attacks by 2. Yeah, alright. For your ganks, whatever. And if you're getting invaded. Melee reduces all incoming damage from champions by 2. Reduces, yeah, okay. Blah, blah, blah. Alright, same thing. We're just reducing damage in the jungle. Reduces damage taken from neutral monsters. Yep, taking basic damage from neutral monsters cause them to bleed. Clear your jungle faster. Especially, this helps with the first few buffs. This is where your auto attacks come into effect. I have 1 rank in this for 2 magic resist, just because of, depending on who he is. 2 armor, 2 magic resist helps dealing with the enemy mid laner or enemy top laner, whatever. 3% maximum health and 36 health. I feel like that's important. You do need a bit more health to start off with, and reduces the effectiveness of slows by 10%. That I think is important as well, for just for general juking and things like that. I mean, because remember, you're in the jungle, you could get it's just a different ball game in the jungle. You could get slowed by you're going in for ganks, and you don't want to get slowed. You could become the focus. Now this is, you'll see, I don't have that, which sucks. I don't have this, which sucks. What do I have though? 5 cooldown reduction, yes. 16 ability power. So late game ability power, right? Because you're not, although you are looking to kind of snowball a little bit, you do recognize between levels 3 to 5, you are very, very vulnerable. Really, when you're going to be strong is post, maybe level 6 you get your ult, yeah, true. But you have cleared your buffs, you might be a little bit low. After you back that next time, maybe you get a gank, right? After you back that next time, or after you regen with your pots, level 7 to 10 is where you start to become pretty strong, given that you haven't fallen behind. Increases ability power by 5%. Champion kills and assists restore 5%. This is just a really good mastery point. Increases damage dealt to champions below 50% health by 5%. So, oh look, they're low, you're going to gank them, increase your damage to them. Killing a unit restores 3 health and 1 mana. Yep. Additional damage to monsters, sustained in the jungle. Alright. So, this, potentially what you could take instead, you may choose that, okay, maybe I don't want that 2 armor and 2 magic resist. Maybe I want extra points here, and here, and here. You know, that's personal preference, but that's perfectly valid to do as a LeBlanc. The thing is, you won't have a lot of ability power early on, so that's something that you need to consider. But definitely, you know, they are good mash points, and you are scaling a little bit into the late game. Yeah. Let's be honest, how many solo queue games go late these days? I think I've pretty much covered everything. What locations, invades, what to start off with, what buffs to choose, and the decisions why that you make, the reasons for your decisions as to your leash, what side of the map you're on, what junglers you're against, invasion, AD teams, AP teams, builds. So that's pretty much everything. This has been Dirty with the LeBlanc Jungle explanation of my ranked game. Hopefully it helps. I'm always open to suggestions. So if you feel like you can improve, maybe on runes masteries, if you think that my reasons for starting somewhere, or where potentially I can gank, or where I can ward better, something like that, anything at all, just contribute, comment, leave a comment, like the video, subscribe if you want to see more videos, and yeah, this has been Dirty. Thanks guys for watching. Sorry about the extended video time. Have a good one. Oh, and of course,
and Mama, I love you. P.O.P. all the time. Right, these all good people. My baby for life.
oh my